I planned for this to come out to Halloween, so I do apologize for being 2 months late. Roll the fucking video. What is horror? Well, by definition, horror films serve to elicit fear, shock, or disgust in its audience. While that's very subjective, not everyone's afraid of the same things, there's always something for everyone. These films tend to explore dark subjects or themes. However, they aren't all one and the same, causing the genre to branch out into several subgenres that all have their own special little quirks. However, categorizing them can be a little tricky, as there's a lot of overlapping or genre bending due to creative freedom. Hell, there's even subgenres within subgenres. To make this easier, I've compiled a list of the common factors within each major subgenre to help you better understand just what it is that makes your skin crawl. This is the anatomy of horror in film. Classic. This refers to the progenitors of the horror genre itself, going all the way back to the black and white era of film. As a bit of a history lesson, the first horror movie, at least the first to be considered a horror movie, was created in 1896, a French movie, Le Manna du Diable, or The House of the Devil. Being the first of its kind, it paved the way for horror as a genre, and expanded with films such as Nosferatu, A Symphony of Horror, and the Universal Monsters collection. With these films, subtlety thrives. The camera may move slowly while music gently accents the scene to build tension, or to watch a character move with grace but emphasizing a power they hold. It's very romantic. At the same time, there can be a fast-paced chase scene with jarring and thrashing music that really makes the heart race. These films can also be described as gothic, referring to the themes and literary style, some of which served as influence or were even adapted in this time. Great classic horror movies include Dracula, Frankenstein, The Wolf Man, and The Invisible Man. I will say, classic also applies to modern depictions of the same stories or ideas. The name itself just refers to their legacy in the foundation of horror. Slasher. A standout of horror, slasher movies are probably the most widely known, as they've created pretty much all of the icons. Freddy, Jason, Chucky, Myers. You don't even need to have seen their movies to know who they are. Slashers involve an unstoppable force, sometimes in a mask, slowly picking off their cast for a variety of reasons. This often results in a final girl or final guy, who's considered the main character and beats the killer in a final battle. What's fun to see here is that most of these killers get sequels galore, forcing them to have to one-up their kills in the next one. Naturally, they can get pretty creative or even downright silly, but very fun all the same. Great slasher horror films include A Nightmare on Elm Street, Halloween, Friday the 13th, and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Supernatural. Of course, how can you have horror without the things that go bump in the night? Especially since there's always been a fascination with what happens after we die. Still, this subgenre can be divided into two distinct categories: ghosts and demons. With ghosts, spirits of the dead seek revenge or have unfinished business. They may even emerge after being disturbed. This isn't no Casper we're talking about. These spirits are malevolent and seek to terrorize or kill their victims. Naturally, those victims look to survive or put them to rest. Great ghost horror films include The Conjuring, Lights Out, and the Amityville Horror. With demons, they're just a step above ghosts in power and far more evil. Often, these movies may explore themes of corruption and innocence through possession or biblical analogies. The main goal is to survive or exorcise all the same. Great demon horror movies include The Exorcist, Sinister, and Insidious. Folk. Stemming from ghosts and demons, folk horror plays off folklore from many different cultures throughout history and the world, including boogeymen or cryptids. Stuff like Krampus, La Llorona, or the Kukui have been the subject of fear for many, and that tradition is carried throughout these films, and even with the creation of new ones. This subgenre also includes the occult and witches, which can be considered folklore due to the superstition of the Middle Ages or the Salem witch trials. Great folk horror films include Krampus, The Babadook, Midsommar, and The Witch. Art house. When it comes to creativity, art house is made with a balls-to-the-walls approach, as they're largely made independently, so directors have full creative freedom to do whatever they want. By no means is that a bad thing, but they can be less straight and narrow as mainstream media, which can either be distracting or captivating depending on how you experience movies. Art house films focus more on themes and storytelling over spooks, being driven more by the story or serving as analogies for society or the human condition. They're very good for making you think or for experiencing amazing visuals. These movies are made with passion and heart. The art part of art house is definitely in bold, italicized, and underlined furiously. Great art house horror films include The Neon Demon, The House That Jack Built, Suspiria, and Mandy. Found footage. While technically not a true subgenre, it's actually a filming technique, it has been very prevalent and successful in horror. This is likely because it's far easier to put yourself in the character's perspective, making the experience scarier. This subgenre is very notable because, well, they're not all the same. Aside from sequels, a movie can use different material like ghosts or monsters, making each one unique for not only how they implement the scares within the medium, but also what the threat is. Great found footage horror movies include As Above, So Below, Paranormal Activity, The Blair Witch Project, and VHS. It's also important to note that found footage paved the way for a similar technique called screen life, in which the perspective is shown through someone's computer screen. It's still very new, but has left quite the impact with films like Spree, Host, and of course, Unfriended. Body horror. Are you squeamish? Cool. These films do not give a flying fuck. In its basic form, body horror shows grotesque and disturbing abuse on the human body. This can come from stuff like diseases, surgery, or mutations, causing uncontrollable and often bloody transformations. That's not to say these movies can't be enjoyable. Part of the fun is seeing the transformation or appreciating the effects, especially if they're done practically. It can be pretty awful, or even downright gross at times. But if done correctly or artistically, it can convey themes of what makes us human. Great body horror films include Reanimator, Tusk, Color Out of Space, and The Fly. Gorno. This one is quite the acquired taste, but if you can stomach it, hey, more power to you. As the name implies, you just watch these sons of bitches suffer. Bloods, guts, limbs, all not in their proper place or attached to a person. This also applies to deaths. They can be pretty creative and messed up. This is pretty much the death metal of horror. While not as acclaimed as other subgenres, there are its fans who love when it's done tastefully and with meaning. And of course, those effects. And of course, when these films use practical effects, it's pretty damn gnarly. Great Gorno horror films include Saw, Ichi the Killer, Hostel, and Final Destination. Zombies. Who can forget the classic zombie? A staple of many cultures, the concept of the living dead has existed for quite some time, having been presented in many different forms, some fast, some slow, some based in fiction entirely, and some based on a real disease. Zombies can also get interesting when there's the question of whether or not humanity remains dormant within. Either way, it's always some good fun watching people fight to survive. Great zombie horror films include Night of the Living Dead, Train to Busan, 28 Days Later, and Dawn of the Dead. Creature feature. As the name implies, the antagonistic threat is a creature, or beast, an animal, or some being of terror. It's a natural fear we all have, especially more towards carnivorous animals like sharks or bears, so it translates well to film. This subgenre comes in 3 different forms: vanilla, tiny terrors, and kaiju. With vanillas, they feature a standard dangerous animals, one that exists normally in our real world. Whether it's basic behavior or through other means like genetic experiments or diseases like rabies, these creatures are out for blood. Great vanilla creature features include Cujo, Jaws, and Piranha. With tiny terrors, the enemy itself can seem pretty unassuming, but you better not underestimate them. They may be manageable alone, but dangerous in packs. Alternatively, the threat may be one single being with a lot of power. They can make your day a living hell. More often than not, this idea is paired with comedy and portrayed more on the cutesy side with few horror elements. Great tiny terror creature features include critters, leprechaun, and gremlins. In Japanese, kaiju means giant monster. Larger than life, these beasts roam through cities, leaving nothing but rubble in their stead and causing terror on the population. The focus is put on finding out a way to stop the threat before it worsens and brings humanity to extinction. These movies are largely, pun entirely intended, popular in Asia, particularly South Korea and Japan. Great kaiju films include Gojira, The Host, and Tremors. Comedy/parody. If you're generally scared of a certain style of horror, there's probably a movie that takes the piss out of it. Comedy and parody both work in very similar ways, but there are some differences. A comedy focuses on jokes around a concept while still being grounded within universe. It's still a horror movie, but with some jokes and lightheartedness. Great horror comedies include Shaun of the Dead, Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, and Zombieland. A parody fully makes fun of the genre, including specific subgenres and their tropes. Often, these movies will mimic the film they're parodies of and are largely comedic over horror. Great horror parodies include Scary Movie, What We Do in the Shadows, and Cabin in the Woods. Psychological. When done right, this subgenre can be the most unsettling, the scariest of the bunch. This is the thriller side of the horror genre, with more of a focus set on the mental condition of a character caused by the circumstances. This can be portrayed as a character study or an exploration of philosophy. The fact that this could happen to anyone, even you, makes it so much more terrifying. Still, it's not so cut and dry. This subgenre comes in three major forms: home invasion, madness, and isolation. Home invasion shares a lot of similarities with slashers, but there's one attribute that sets them apart. Home invasion films focus more on the stalking of the threat and guessing when they'll attack next, creating an amazing suspense factor. Great home invasion films include The Purge, The Strangers, and Hush. Madness in itself serves great for a character study. Often these films will focus on the antagonists rather than the victims and what really makes these psychos, or seeing someone descend into madness and ending with that reveal. Great madness horror films include American Psycho, Misery, and Joker. I don't care what any of you say. Joker is very much a psychological horror movie. I mean, it hits all the same talking points I had about the subgenre, especially the madness type. I mean, it's so similar to American Psycho. Y'all guys made the same incel memes. I mean, no one wants to say it because it's a DC comic character, and I know I'm going to get some flack for it. But yeah, it's a psychological horror movie. I'm moving on. Fuck y'all. Being forced alone can take quite the toll on the psyche, which is where the isolation category can come into play. This descent can lead to hallucinations or shifting characters, forcing you to think about what's real and what's not. Is this really happening, or all inside someone's head? All throughout wondering if there's hope. Great isolation horror films include The Lodge, Gerald's Game, and The Night Eats the World. So now we circle back around to the overlap, which is where it gets a little complicated. As I said, these subgenres can mix, which is where that initial confusion comes from. But if you look at the notes, you can figure it out a little easier. For example, Paranormal Activity is both found footage and supernatural. American Psycho is largely psychological with some slasher elements. What We Do in the Shadows plays off the classic vampires and uses found footage for comedy purposes. Hell, Scream is both comedy and parody while also being a slasher, so why is this all important? Well, as individuals, we're all wired differently. We have our own preferences and phobias. But maybe that's why horror is so captivating. Just as we love thrills like roller coasters, we like to be scared. It literally causes the amygdala to send stress signals to the nervous system, causing goosebumps, sweat excretion, and an increase in heart rate. The fact that so many movies have been made for so many phobias, it goes back to the idea that there really is something for everyone, and we can all feel that rush. So, knowing what you know now, I hope you have a better idea of what you'll be watching tonight.
I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. As for my horror movie lovers, feel free to comment below on your favorite horror subgenre and movie. They don't have to be the same, just let us know. And as always, thanks for watching.